As WTIU's Alex Roy reports, Democrats say school funding and some social programs may still suffer.
With nearly 350 amendments in the House of Representatives alone, Indiana's proposed $14.1 billion general fund budget has become the center of aggressive debate. This year's budget bill is expected to increase state government general fund expenditures by about $300 million. This may be the result of a revamped revenue forecast system which predicts $500 million a year increases in state tax and fee receipts. The new system comes on the heels of 2 years of overly optimistic forecasts, which saw shortfalls in the billions of dollars for 2009 and 2010.
The last 2 or 3 years, obviously, they failed us miserably because the economy went down so quickly and people lost their jobs so quickly.
Education funding is the single largest item in the budget, accounting for about 52 cents of every dollar generated through taxes. Republicans say proposed cuts in appropriations to fund K-12 education are a practical necessity resulting from a lack of money.
I actually voted for a budget 2 years ago that spent more money on everything, but we had more money 2 years ago. Today, Hoosier families are hurting and the state is hurting, and we've got to tighten our belt, and it's not because we want to. It's just because the alternative is much worse.
Prior to this year's legislative session, the state's educational landscape had already changed drastically, with earlier legislation taking schools off of local property tax rolls, a move which State Senate Minority Leader Vi Simpson says has permanently tied school funding to sources of revenue that are highly variable depending on the state of the economy.
We used to fund schools partially by property taxes, and so when there was a recession or a dip in revenue sources, the property taxes were always stable. And by putting the property tax caps in the Constitution, we're never able to go back to that as a kind of safety net.
Simpson's leading legislative opponent, President Pro Tem and Majority Leader of the Senate, David Long, says schools were using property taxes to undertake expensive and unnecessary capital projects, which were placing an unnecessary burden on taxpayers.
Indiana's been very famous about building Taj Mahals in the past. Per capita, maybe the most expensive school construction in the country at one time in the very recent past. I think property tax reform has reformed that.
The current legislative budget, like all budgets prior, includes a formula which dictates how much each school receives from the state in funding. Unlike previous budget sessions, the limitations on local tax funding mentioned earlier have placed the formula at the center of considerable scrutiny. Democrats like Senate Minority Leader Vi Simpson have positioned themselves as defenders of public education.
Almost everything that's being called education reform is really about taking money out of the public schools.
And Republicans like Long claiming the mantle of reformer.
We've had to manage our budget very carefully, but still prioritizing our K-12 educational funding. And I think we've achieved that with this budget proposal.
So I think what we've seen here is that there are moving targets with this budget in terms of how much revenue we've got, where are we going to spend it. If I could get a 30-second encapsulation from each of you, starting with Terry, where do you think we should be aiming based on the fact we've got all these moving targets?
You know, legislators will give, speak a lot of rhetoric about the importance of public education and funding it. It does make up over 50% of the state budget, and the fact that they will put some modest increases is good news given the tough economy that we've had and the declining revenues. But they are projecting 4 to 5% revenue growth in the next 2 years, but the increase for public education is only 0.5% and then 1%. So perhaps they could have done a little bit more there. Maybe they're being a little too conservative. Really, it is a new day in school funding and public education. We've become a referendum state. School districts are going to the ballot often now to ask for increases in general fund revenues, and most of those are being defeated. So school districts are really grappling with tough times in public school finance. They've made cuts, teacher layoffs are happening, program elimination and reductions are happening, and so it's going to be probably 2 to 4 more years before times get a lot better for public education. Times may continue to get worse before they get better.
Brian, where are you aiming your budgetary rifle?
Well, education is half the budget, and I think Terry summarized it very well. It's the other half that I'm really concerned about now, because when you look at what was cut, it's things like the state's part of the federal program Medicaid, women, infant, children's health care, a number of social programs of one sort or another which they capped, in a number of different ways. They made it a big hullabaloo about the right for people to take guns practically everywhere. And then they also, a big hullabaloo about defunding Planned Parenthood, which even the Speaker has said may be unconstitutional. So in a sense, this budget is going to pass, and this is it right here. And you can read it, anybody can get it off of the internet and look at it. You can see what the money's going for, but you also have to realize they're operating within a very strict limitation. The budget must be balanced in the state of Indiana, and it's always tough choices, and it does lay out the landscape for the next election. Indeed, with Obama at the top and the very good ground forces that he has, there's a number of issues that are presented to the Democrats that I am sure they are going to run in. Whether they win or not is going to depend on our viewers' votes.
Joe, how are you going to make some of those tough choices that Brian's talking about?
Right. Budgets are about choices, but they're about priorities. They're really about the type of society that we want to live in. And I thought it was interesting that Senator Long mentioned priorities and then said, we built Taj Mahals for these schools. I think, some parents would like their children to go to schools that are Taj Mahals. They're the best, that are that are providing the best infrastructure and the best teachers. I think some of I can't say where I would cut, I'm not a budget expert, but some of these budget cuts are savage. And I think they're causing a political problem for somebody like Mitch Daniels, who wants to position himself as a fiscal conservative, but a social kind of moderate. And you've got a majority in the Assembly that is doing things that he would rather they not do, like cut women's reproductive health services, like cut social services to disabled children. Mitch is going to have a hard time with that when he moves onto the national stage if that goes through. So I think those kind of priorities are really at odds with what a lot of people see as a vision for what Indiana should be, including people like Mitch Daniels and a lot of his wealthy contributors like Eli Lilly, who do not want a same-sex marriage ban in the state constitution, because a lot of their top employees are same-sex couples who pay into the tax base of the state of Indiana. Do we want to be that state?
My thanks to all three of you, and my thanks for your time and your consideration of this. These are tough choices, but your opinions are much appreciated. My thanks also to Dan Goldblatt and to Alex Roy and to Ben Skirvin. And we'd like you to send your questions for our next InFocus program to infocus@indiana.edu. You can also leave a comment or see portions of this program by visiting indianapublicmedia.org/infocus. And thanks to you for watching and listening. Have a nice night.
Production support for InFocus is provided by Hoosiers for Higher Education, a statewide organization of alumni and friends of Indiana University, dedicated to raising the awareness of the importance of higher education for Indiana citizens and the state's future. More information at 800-937-3448. And Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for Central and Southern Indiana cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you.